the announcement of the company's forthcoming issue. Before we begin, I would like to introduce the management and distinguished guests who would be addressing today's gathering. From the company, we have with us Mr. Srinivasan Ravi, Chairman and Managing Director, and Mr. Chandrasekhar C.B., Chief Financial Officer. Representing the BRLMs, we have Mr. Pinak Rudra Bhattacharya, Senior Vice President at IIFL Securities Limited, and Mr. Ashish Nigam, Executive Director at Axis Capital Limited. We have placed all microphones on mute. After the presentation is done, we will welcome questions. A reminder, the questions can be typed in the Q&A panel available to you, which will be read out to the management upon completion of the presentation. We would first like to take you through a short AV, which will give us some more insight into the company and its journey. May we have the AV, please?
Craftsman Automation, a name synonymous with engineering excellence. Founded in 1986, Craftsman has grown into a formidable diversified engineering firm. We have 12 strategically located manufacturing facilities in 7 locations across India, with a total floor area of 1.5 million square feet and 2,400 employees, catering to the business segments of automotive powertrain and others, automotive aluminium products, and industrial and engineering. Our automotive powertrain division manufactures fully finished high-precision automotive parts, making us the largest player involved in machining of engine cylinder blocks, cylinder heads, camshafts, transmission housings, turbocharger parts for commercial vehicles, tractors, passenger cars, and utility vehicles. We supply directly to leading auto OEMs. The Auto Aluminium division has facilities for high-pressure die casting, low-pressure die casting, and gravity die casting, in addition to the in-house tool room and machining and finishing setup to provide automotive parts for two-wheelers and commercial and passenger vehicles to OEMs, industrial and engineering. Our in-house aluminium sand foundry supplies machined aluminium castings for power transmission switchgear manufacturers. We have state-of-the-art gear manufacturing facilities, including in-house heat treatment, and CNC grinding provides high-precision gears and gearboxes for diverse end-use industries such as elevators, metro transportation, compressors, printing, and steel rolling mills. We design and manufacture a wide variety of special-purpose machines such as drilling, milling, leak testing, industrial high-pressure washing machines, and assembly conveyors. Our in-house tool room has highly qualified engineers and advanced machinery for design and supply of highly complicated tools for plastic injection molding, sheet metal dies, aluminium dies for diversified end-use industries. Craftsman Storage Systems, a sub-brand of Craftsman Automation, provides storage solutions like pallet racking, shelving, automated storage and retrieval systems for a wide range of customers in e-commerce, 3PL, warehousing, FMCG, pharma, automotive, consumer durable, and many other industries. Our V-Store and automated storage retrieval systems improves the storage density and enables better inventory control while also reducing floor space and manpower costs. Our storage systems are designed and manufactured by our in-house sheet metal fabrication teams. Our material handling division manufactures and supplies industrial lifting equipment such as chain hoists, wire rope hoists, crane kits, and light crane systems, all following the highest safety and industry standards. With state-of-the-art technology and our dedicated and passionate team, Craftsman Automation is poised for further growth and engineering excellence.
Thank you. I would now like to invite Mr. Pinak Rudra Bhattacharya from IIFL Securities to initiate the proceedings. Over to you, Pinak.
Thank you, Gaurav. Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to welcome you to this meet for the IPO of Craftsman Automation in the run-up to an IPO launch by the end of this week. Essentially, before I get a little bit down into the business, I would like to introduce the panelists in this meeting. Apart from my colleague Ashish Nigam, who represents Axis, I have the management team led by Mr. Srinivasan Ravi. Mr. Srinivasan Ravi is a first-generation entrepreneur who set up this company close to 3.5 decades back. He has a bachelor's in engineering in mechanical engineering and is a recipient of numerous awards over the past 3 to 4 decades in entrepreneurship, in automotive excellence, and so on and so forth. I have also with me Mr. C.B. Chandrasekhar. He's the CFO of the company. Mr. Chandrasekhar joined the company a year or so back, but he has more than 3 decades of experience in finance, secretarial, and accounting. He lends his rich experience to the company. From an IPO standpoint, I just want to let the group know of some of the key dates and some on the offer structure a little bit. The anchor is scheduled on Friday, which is the 12th of March. We open the IPO on Monday, which is the 15th of March. The issue is open for 3 days and ends on Wednesday, which is the 17th of March. The price band, which has been announced today morning in the newspapers, as some of you would have seen, is 1488 to 1490 per equity share. The IPO is a combination of primary as well as primary issuance and secondary offer for sale. The company is raising 150 crores as a part of the primary component in the IPO. Apart from that, there is a secondary component, which is an offer for sale of around 4.52 million shares, which is being sold by some of the existing shareholders, including 2 private equity investors who have backed the company for the last 7 to 8 years. One of them is IFC Washington, who's selling approximately 50% of its stake. The other is Afirma Capital, who's also selling 50% of its stake. That's on the offer structure. Essentially, from a company standpoint, before I pass on the mantle to Mr. Ravi to talk in detail more about the company, just a few things that I wanted to keep you updated. We have done detailed institutional roadshows prior to this meet, and we found phenomenal interest from institutional investors. So we are very confident about the success of this IPO. The company is well regarded by the investor community as well as the corporate fraternity in the auto and auto component space. They're a diversified engineering player with vertically integrated manufacturing capabilities. As you may have seen from the corporate film, which was displayed a few minutes back, the company is principally present in 3 segments, which is automotive powertrain and others, automotive aluminum, and industrial and engineering. The company is the largest player in the machining of cylinder blocks and cylinder heads in intermediate, medium, and heavy commercial vehicles, as well as in the construction equipment segment in India. It is one of the top 3 to 4 component players with respect to machining of cylinder blocks for the tractor segment in India, and it has also got 2 other segments, which is likely to do well over the next few years. I would like to now invite Mr. Srinivasan Ravi to take us through the presentation, talk about his journey, how he's built this company to the current state, the segments of the business, and over to you, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Welcome. Good afternoon to ladies and gentlemen. My name is Srinivasan Ravi. I'm a first-generation entrepreneur. I'm coming from a family of doctors. I started Craftsman in 1986. We started Craftsman as just a small-scale industry catering to the domestic region for the highly precise engineering parts, which we are machining and supplying. That was how we started. And by 1995, we started getting into export to USA, Japan, and Europe. And we grew very well on the export until 2004. We were very much focused on export. We were 80% export company. That was when we were approached by the auto majors to do the cylinder block and cylinder head machining, which nobody else was doing in India. So that is the start of the auto journey for us. That was in 2004. We took in private equity from IFC Washington in 2010 and also Standard Chartered Bank in 2012. Now it's called Afirma or Marina Singapore. So this was the private equity raise. Between them, they've invested 144 crores for a combined stake of 29.5%, which almost 50% they're exiting now during this IPO. They are with us for now 11 years and 9 years respectively. Broadly speaking, our business segment is divided into three. One is the auto powertrain, the auto aluminum, and the industrial engineering. We have 12 strategic location plants all over India. We have long-standing customer relationships, and we are a well diversified engineering company. I mean, when I say diversified, sometimes it may be misleading, but I would say that we have grown from an engineering background into the auto, not on the other way around. And even in the industrial engineering space, we are well diversified. We have grown well from the time IFC invested in us in 2010. FY10 was only around 190 crore was the sales for Craftsman, and from then on we have been growing even during the most difficult period in the Indian history about the GST era, the demonetization, the BS6, all this from FY16 to FY20 we have still grown at a CAGR of 14%, and EBITDA also has kept pace with that. We have an industry-leading EBITDA of 27%, where we have a mixture of business, where in the auto powertrain, we do services also, apart from being a comprehensive manufacturer, and auto aluminum, we are fully a comprehensive manufacturer, and also in the industrial engineering space. The revenue split is the auto powertrain is the biggest portion of the business, and followed by the industrial engineering business, which is the second biggest segment. The third is the auto aluminum. Auto aluminum, we entered this business 7 years back, which was a natural progression for us. We were in the industrial aluminum business for more than 20 years, and this shows the revenue split, which is there. The EBITDA margins are also mentioned here. What more is important is all the three business segments are having some synergy together, which I'll explain in the coming slides. The auto powertrain business, which is the biggest in segment, we are well protected from the EV for one simple fact that 90% of this particular segment's business comes from non-passenger vehicles. It comes major from the medium and heavy duty commercial vehicles, the farm equipment like the tractors, the construction machinery like these JCBs and caterpillars. So overall, I think we are well protected from the EV onslaught which is happening. On the passenger vehicles, we are on the bigger passenger vehicle segments like the SUVs, which are weighing more than 1.5 tons weight. And this will be the last portion will go into the EV. We are welcoming the EV because it will give us more opportunities going forward. In this business, when you see the end use segment, the biggest 50% is from the medium and heavy duty commercial vehicle. And the next biggest is the farm equipment. I will also tell you about the type of products what we make on the auto powertrain. In the auto powertrain by itself, more than 50% of the business comes from cylinder block and cylinder head, which is the top of the pyramid parts in any any commercial vehicle or any IC engine. Normally, these parts are manufactured by the OEMs themselves. We are the leading player in India for the commercial vehicles, as reported in the CRISIL report in the DRHP itself. It is capex intensive, but the bulk of the capex is behind us. And with this capex cycle, we need only maintenance capex and small debottlenecking or capacity balancing capex going forward. We have demonstrated in FY19 itself a good top line of 1,000 crore, which got reduced to 700 crore during the BS6 era. Yes, in FY19, bulk of the capex as a company, we have done more than 400 crore. This capex was done across all the three segments of the business, the auto powertrain, auto aluminum, and industrial engineering. And without that capex getting utilized fully itself, the new engine vehicle models getting launched, everything got delayed for various reasons. So we have got the business, we are well entrenched in the business. So the capacity utilization, which is quite low, is evident from this slide, where we had 1,000 crore revenue coming in FY19 itself. Even that capex of FY19 was not put into use. So what is good is these particular powertrain products are having a longer gestation period. Even we are expecting that this EV penetration on that will be will take close to a decade to come in, or it may be fuel cells, something else may come in, and these businesses are well protected. In the auto aluminum business, we took a conscious decision 7 years back that the auto powertrain, which was growing at a very, very high double digit, will slow down to maybe around 15% growth or so, which you have seen from the earlier slide. In the auto aluminum, we are fully integrated. Auto aluminum is by business by itself globally is a very, very big business. In India, I think the auto aluminum is more predominantly towards two-wheeler. That's how we also started the business. But on the passenger vehicle segment, maybe it is an IC engine or a hybrid passenger vehicle or an EV, aluminum usage will keep increasing. We are at a very small level as a country to use aluminum. And with this point of an inflection where there will be some EV penetration, I think new platforms will carry more and more aluminum to increase the range of the vehicles. So while we still
Sir, you went on mute. Please unmute yourself.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, sorry. We have, even though we were concentrating on the two-wheeler business, we have won businesses from the four-wheeler, from Mahindra, also from PSA very recently for a global supply of parts for the passenger vehicle. And also we got commercial vehicle business from Daimler. We are one of the few companies who are present in all three technological segments of the business, the processing wise, that is the gravity die casting, the high pressure die casting, and the low pressure die casting. In the industrial engineering sector, we also have the sand casting business. So some of the parts what we see are already we are doing for the lightweighting on the low pressure die casting, which we are doing for the Marasso vehicle, which is almost a 1 meter part, which is one of the largest parts which are done for the lightweighting here. This capex is very, very recent. So we have the capacity utilization wise is very low. We have a lot of headroom to growth. We have got the business orders, and we are likely to soak up the capacity in the coming years. We are fully integrated in a way that we make the dies, we make the castings, we also do the mission, we assist the customers in the die design with the product capability also. That is very interesting for our customer. Our machining has been a core strength for a long, long time, and this also is playing a big role to have our profitability going on this business. What we're eyeing, which is on the right side of the slide, where the lightweighting of the passenger vehicles will happen in the coming future. So it will lead to more and more aluminum content per vehicle, and that is where we will see this growth coming from. The industrial engineering sector, which is the historical, the legacy business, where we are there for last 35 years. We have many subsegments. The biggest segment is still the contract manufacturing, where we are doing direct exports to many countries in Europe and Japan and also US. Apart from that, we have developed some products also from our side, the storage solutions as well as the material handling business. The gearbox business also supports the material handling business. The special purpose missions, what we manufacture, is complementing our auto powertrain and auto aluminum business also, but it's a standalone profitable business. The tool room where we make the dies is very strategically important for our aluminum die casting business also. The storage solutions, where we were on the fringe for the last 10 years, we have invested in a greenfield facility in FY19. You may ask why it has taken us 10 years to do that. Of course, we initially thought of getting into technical tie-ups, collaborations. Almost we signed one in 2012, but that didn't happen because GST got postponed. But we put up our own technical center for design and development. Today, we're proud to say that the greenfield facility, all the new sections on the conventional racking, the automated storage solutions, which you saw on the video, all have been developed in-house from our own design team. And this is an exciting way forward on this business, mainly because of the post-GST and the e-commerce taking over. Even pharma, it is somewhat mandatory in certain types of storage that it cannot be done manually because of the risk. So the entire storage solution business, where multinationals all over the globe are very, very larger in size. India is very nascent in this area. So we have entered the business when the curve is just starting to grow. There's one big advantage. Coming back to the industrial sector, industrial segment of the business, we are sector agnostic. Even our export customers are from various end use segments. They are in oil and gas, they are in locomotive, they are in flow control valves, gearboxes, in the marine equipment, and one of our major customers, Mitsubishi, is in the cartoon box manufacturing and printing. So, and we may manufacture some for some customers fully finished products also as a equipment, and we ship it directly to the end customer around the world, where under their brand. So this is a long, we are well entrenched, and it's a long learning process, which in the last 35 years, the know-how on this business is part of our DNA. This is the DNA which helped us to migrate in 2004 into the auto business, and also into the, in a significant way, into the auto aluminum business. And this is the backbone of our company, which we call it as engineering advantage. And this knowledge will help us in the changing times, which now no conventional business will be easy to go, run of the mill. Okay, we did this for the last 10 years and we'll continue to do it for the next 10 years. We are confident that we have been learning and changing our business models, and even the top 10 customers very often, mainly because of our engineering strength. So this is where we are a big differentiator vis-a-vis our any other company in the auto space in the country. In the industrial engineering business, when we have done the diverse many adjustments on the product lines, we have seen the margins growing, and this is still a lot of unexplored areas are there on the contract manufacturing. Now the Make in India policy, the China +1 policy, all this is going to help when the capex cycle sets in India. We're the only very few companies in India who has got the end-to-end infrastructure. What you have seen on the video is one of the biggest plants what we have. Even though we have plants spread across the country, the biggest plant is in our headquarters in Coimbatore, which houses 50% of our gross block, that is around 1,250 crore out of the 2,500 crore gross block, and half our people, more than 1,500 people in one premises. And we have all the three segments of the business, that is auto powertrain, auto aluminum, and industrial engineering in this particular campus. And this is one area where when the capex cycle comes back into India, we will leverage on this particular plant to cater to that needs. While the three segments look different, the synergy between the segments, the common equipment out of the 2,500 crore gross block, bulk of it is on the general purpose machinery, because our customers have invested in our auto powertrain business for the special purpose equipment. That is how we have managed our business. And if you look at it, the end use we are diversified. The top 10 customers are constituting over 50% of sales. They're represented by all the three segments of the business, and the flexibility to use the capex, whatever we've done across most of the capex, at least across the three segments, to mitigate the risk and the up cycles, is very, very unique for us overall. And we offer, we give a lot of value to our customers, so the customer stickiness also is there. The capex cycle, as you very clearly see, is behind us. And the way we are going, the 9 months results on the updated DRHP, which you might have seen, we have done 1,000 crore even in the pandemic year for the 9 months, with the PAT of around 50 crore. And the last year was the worst year, of course, because of the BS6. And we're very confident that the run rate, what we have achieved in the Q3, if you had seen the updated DRHP versus the first DRHP, we would have seen the number, the Q3 number can be calculated as 480 crore level. So the run rate is, we are on a good run rate now, and we are very confident that the capacity we have put up will get soaked up in the coming couple of years. So even last year our capex is low. This year also capex is low. Going forward also, we don't see any big capex need, and the capacity utilization is justified from the fact that the Q3 number is, when you multiply by 4, it gives a very, very good, decent number going forward, and still capacity utilization is not anywhere near the peak capacity utilization, what we expect. The most important point is the debt. The debt, when we opened this year, last year, financial year, March 31st, FY20, we closed at around more than 1,000 crore debt. I think, if I remember right, is around 1,040 crore was the debt. And we ended December 31st, and the DRHP, it is 880 crore debt. So this means we have reduced debt by 160 crore in the pandemic year, where some of our peer companies, some of the smaller auto OEMs were going for COVID loans, refacement of the existing loans and things like that. We have managed to reduce debt. So that means that shows even in something like a black swan event or a pandemic, the pandemic was followed by a BS6 event. So even then, the company has been very resilient, and whatever losses we had in the Q1 has been covered in Q2, Q3. We made a PAT for the 9-month, a decent PAT for the 9-month period. And the way it is, the debt today, even as we speak, it is very clear that the debt is very close to 1.1, 1.2 range, debt to equity in December. And with the equity money coming in 150 crore and some generation in Q4 profitability, surely the debt equity will be less than 1, the way it looks, surely. So we have demonstrated a decent EBITDA in FY19 in spite of Q2, Q3, Q4 slowing down. If Q3 and Q4 not slow down, I think we would have performed well. And FY20 was the worst for the auto sector. Still, we had a decent EBITDA. Even in this year, the 9 months figure shows a decent EBITDA. Looking at that particular point, I think debt is not a point of concern for us. That is one of the confidence what we have. And even the equity, whatever we're raising, is to get the debt equity to less than 1 by March itself, so that we can improve our credit rating to bring down the financial cost further. The return of capital employed, as we speak, with the EBITDA, at a low level now, but the depreciation has already peaked out. I think that is very, very interesting to know that the EBITDA, the depreciation number will not make big changes going forward because of the big gross block what we have. And also looking at a fact that our debt is coming down, our financial cost is also coming down compared to last year. In the 9 months number, you have seen it has come down. With better capacity utilization, we're very confident about the return of capital employed. As you see, we have demonstrated in FY19 a good return of capital employed in spite of 2 quarters being bad. The engineering strength, which is our core to our successfully maneuvering all these business cycles and still managing to grow. We are present across the whole value chain, the product design capabilities. We have very strong designers. We have interchangeable capacities. We have flexibility, and we have the core knowledge on the engineering, which helps us to do things better and more, I would say, more productive, to control our costs better, which is reflected in our financials. We have, over a period of time, even though we entered auto very late, we can see that we have very reputed names from 2004 onwards. And having entered auto late in 2004 and being now in a good, reasonable size of auto ancillary company, doing good value addition there, the point will be that any new turbulence in the market of the auto or any new opportunities which come up, the company is very agile, flexible. The knowledge resides with the company. The long experience which is there in the company will help us to be very flexible in taking up new opportunities to move forward. The bulk of the investment having made, now there is no more need for any greenfield facilities. It is only maybe small capacity adjustments here and there. So I think we are well entrenched to take on the incremental business going forward. I'm ably supported by Mr. Chandrasekhar, a veteran, and also my COO, who takes care of auto aluminum and the auto powertrain business along with me. He has been with the company for more than 20 years. Gautam Ram is with the company for the last 6 years. He is taking care of the industrial engineering segment of the business, and more he is spearheading the storage business, which is also which is quite according to the CRISIL report published now, DRHP is going to grow year on year. So with this, I complete my presentation, and I'm ready for the Q&A.
Thank you, sir. We will now open the floor for the Q&A session. While we've already received some questions, we would request everyone to post their respective questions in the Q&A panel at the bottom of the screen. We will try our best to ensure that all questions are answered. The first question. What kind of asset turns do we do on our current asset base? And what is our target asset turn ratio, if any?
If you look at if you read our balance sheet, P&L very clearly, I think the amount of material what we use is quite low overall in the top line. So we cannot be an apple-to-apple comparison on the asset to turnover ratio, because some of our revenue comes from pure value addition, where customer that is how there is also explains the higher flow through to from the top line to the EBITDA. This is one thing which can be derived from the P&L, which is on the public domain.
Next question. You spoke about the storage solution segment. Could you throw some light on how big the storage solution segment can be?
At least on the global players, the top 6 players, that is 3 in Japan. Daifuku is the biggest in the world. Moratech is number 2 in Japan, and number 3 is Cebu. And the global majors are Schiefer in Germany, of course, Bastian Solutions, which is now taken over by Toyota Group, and that is Bastian Solutions in Europe, but now taken over by Toyota. Vanderlei, and it is also taken over by Toyota. Then we have Dematic. All of them, at least we see it is in billions of dollars of revenue. Some of them make the racking, some of them do not make the racking, but all of them are a solution provider for the entire cycle, including the automated storage solutions, where you have to retrieve the material, we have to put them on a conveyor, we have to have software, we have to have ERP interrelated. The e-commerce, otherwise the amount of orders, the goods they handle, these storage solutions play a very, very key aspect. Companies like Amazon have their own large engineering division. They just buy some hardware. They don't depend on providers like the global majors, whom of the names which I already told you. Companies like Daifuku don't supply to Amazon. Amazon has got their own manufacturing department. So that is the size of the business. So we are at the tip of the iceberg, and we will see a lot of action going forward. This is the starting point is the GST, and it is well researched now. Apart from that, cold storage is also there. Still, we are very at the beginning of the cycle of preserving our food products.
Thank you. The next question. In the powertrain segment, your margins are at 34%, which is almost twice that of other forgings companies. What are the reasons for such high margins?
Compared to forging companies who make the forging and do the machining, we are at the highest of the value chain on the auto powertrain. That is, the auto powertrain, when you say that which are the most critical parts, which normally the OEM 25 years back, they used to make it in-house. They call it the 5 Cs. The 5 Cs, I'll start at the bottom of the pyramid of the 5C. That is the connecting rod, which got outsourced 25, 30 years back. Then it came to the camshaft, which also got outsourced to more than 20 years back. The crankshaft, which was more difficult, the third of the value chain, got outsourced 20 years back. And you know very well, Bharat Forge is a world leader in that sort of in the segment of the business. The top two are the cylinder head, and the top of the pyramid is a cylinder block, which the OEM normally thinks it is their core technology, And if something goes wrong with that, the product fails, especially on commercial vehicle segment where the vehicle has to run day in, day out. It has to cover, the powertrain has to last 1 million kilometers, unlike a passenger vehicle, which normally is discarded after maybe a couple of 100,000 overall. Even 100,000 is, they discard the vehicle, but this is 1 million kilometers. So this means that these particular parts are very high in value addition. This also explains EBITDA. Another portion of the other area, but it's capex intensive, it's technology intensive. Yes, I agree. We, unlike other forging companies who are doing the axle parts like the stub axle, the front beams, the camshafts, and the crankshafts, they make the forging, they buy the material, steel, they make the forging, they machine it, and then supply it. We do not have a cast iron foundry. We are a machining supplier in the auto powertrain. The entire auto powertrain business is derived from either we buy the castings from certain foundries, like leading foundries like even Kirloskar, but the point will be that we don't do our castings in-house. We do the value addition. In most cases, our customers have their own foundries, like the Tatas, they buy the material, they make their own castings, they give it to us for machining. So that means the material cost is not captured in our business. That is the reason for the higher EBITDA margin. But we look at the gross block, a very high gross block. We look at the ROC. ROC will be more or less in line with our other two segments of the business. Of course, auto aluminum is a very new business. It will take some time to mature. But on the industrial engineering side and the auto powertrain business, I think the ROC will be in similar lines. I think the EBITDA, the explanation is the material cost sometimes is not getting captured in the top line.
Next question. You spoke about the potential application of aluminium in passenger vehicles. What is your strategy or game plan for this segment, if you could tell us?
The strategy here is the CAFE norms, which is in 2023, if it is implemented, at least the heavier passenger vehicles weighing more than 1.5 tons will be asked to say that you can emit only so much carbon footprint. When you say that, I think they have to pay a green tax, or they have to reduce the emissions. How to reduce the emissions? They have to reduce the size of their engines, because any engine which is producing some emission has to have a lot of costly after treatment. When they reduce the size of the engine, the power available for the vehicle reduces if the dead weight is more. All around the world, the question is coming, why should the vehicle weigh 1.5 tons to average take 3 passengers or 4 passengers weighing around 250-300 kg? Why the lightweighting system has not come into place when a lot of aluminum, a lot of other composites, everything is being used in even aircrafts? Why the passenger vehicles are getting only steel is being used more? So the lightweighting has set up. I think the Indian passenger cars are having 1/3 of the aluminum content when compared to the European passenger cars. I think one thing, maybe cost has been a deterrent, or the platforms are historically been developed, but now soon the lightweighting has to happen, because I think the new passenger vehicles will start developing platforms which are common for EV, hybrid vehicles, and IC engines. And any new platform development, I think lightweighting of this will happen.
Thank you. Next question. What would be the revenue breakup between MNHCVs, LCVs, PVs, two-wheelers, tractors, and the industrial segment, if you could tell us?
I can tell you only broadly. In the auto powertrain, more than 50% of our revenues comes from the medium and heavy duty commercial vehicles. Our presence in the light commercial vehicle is very less. If you ask me why, because the powertrain it becomes very intricate on the medium duty and heavy duty, mainly on the heavy duty, because the heavy duty truck covers 10 times more kilometers per year, or at least 7-8 times compared to say a smaller vehicle like a 3-wheeler commercial vehicle to a Tata Ace or something like that. They ply in between cities. The powertrain is need not be as robust as in a heavy duty commercial vehicle. That is why we chose to concentrate on the heavy duty commercial vehicles in that segment. So 50% is coming from the medium and heavy duty commercial vehicle. Balance is coming from farm equipment, which is a very big segment for us, the tractors. Then is the followed by the construction machinery. Passenger vehicles out of the auto powertrain is only 10%, around 10%. I don't want to give correct numbers because we have to calculate, and if it's not in the DRHP, I would not like to comment more than overall these numbers. Yes.
Next question. How do you mitigate your increase in commodity prices?
We don't have any commodity price increase, decrease. We are end-to-end covered by our customer on the auto powertrain, because we have tri-party agreements with our supplier in case where we buy the castings, and it's a straight pass-through with no lead and lag. This is the beauty of that business on the auto powertrain, where the customer and our supplier directly discuss the prices wherever we're exposed to, where we need to buy. So we're not exposed to any commodity risk on the entire auto powertrain business, totally. In the auto aluminum, we have a price correction every quarter based on the LME in the International London Metal Exchange prices, and there is also a factor for the local prices. It is on a trailing quarter. Yes, in the last 3 quarters, we have borne the brunt because every quarter the aluminum price has been increasing. But when it stabilizes, we are okay. When it reduces, we gain. But there is no long-term implication on any commodity price on the auto aluminum, because the new price kicks in the next quarter based on the last quarter's average price. So the third segment, on the industrial engine segment, we buy, of course, very little raw material, where we have some bought outs like electric motors, like bearings, many other things we buy out. Yes, there is some steel which we buy, but that is not long term. We are ability to price the products on a continuous basis. So we are exposed to a 3-month level. We make the price corrections in line with the commodity price increases. So this also explains how during this, even the pandemic period of 9 months, we are able to show on 1,000 crore revenue, almost a 290 crore EBITDA, which is on the DRHP. So we are not exposed to commodity price corrections.
Thank you, sir. What is your strategy or process if an OEM approaches you to do a new key component?
The strategy is first, let us look at it, whether it fits into our current business model, the capabilities, capacities, and the knowledge what is available. Is it a stretch from that? What is the business? Is the business scalable? Is the business reliable? I mean, reliable means is the customer volumes, whatever saying is reliable. Then when we have that filter passed, then we look at the costing. At the costing, if the customer is willing to pay a very decent ROC going forward, yes, we'll go for that. But if even the prices are right, theoretically, and the ROC is theoretically okay, but we suspect that the volumes may not come, or the longevity of this product, or the survival of this product in the market, I think we shy away from that. Yes.
Thank you. There are a number of questions around EVs. I'll just club them into one. Automotive companies are adapting towards electric vehicles. Do you see any impact of the adoption of electric vehicles on your business? And how does the company intend to adopt to it?
Today, on the auto powertrain, the onslaught of EV will not affect us, at least for the next 7-8 years. As I mentioned, the passenger vehicle segment of the business is very small. The onslaught of EV will help our auto aluminum business, which is still at a nascent stage. Last year our turnover was hardly 250 odd crores in that business totally. So I think that will grow because of the EV penetration. With the EV coming in, I think also the hybrid also will kick in parallelly in India. In a country like India, the infrastructure available for charging across the country will not happen immediately. So still, maybe cities may adopt to EV. The urban areas will stick to either IC engines or in a hybrid vehicle. That means more development on the smaller IC engines will continue to happen for quite some time. So I think that is more an opportunity rather than problem for us. I would say it is an evolution. It is not a revolution, the EV cycle. The first Tesla was sold 8 years ago, and we know what volume they are in. Yes, Europe is changing quite fast after the diesel problems with the Volkswagen. But on the lighter mode, I just want to say, just 45 days ago or 60 days ago, a new coal plant was inaugurated in Germany. There's a big press release where all the ministers spoke that there's a new coal plant has been commissioned. And they said we'll today 28, even as we speak, 28% of Germany's power is being produced by coal in thermal plants, coal plants in Germany. And they say they will phase out all the coal plants in 2038. My German friends, where we have got a lot of interactions, they say we are burning coal and producing electricity for the EV vehicles. Yes, but EV is here to stay. It is not a joke anymore. Surely the companies have who have neglected that are going to face a big problem. But we are looking at it as an opportunity, but we are never exposed to the passenger vehicle segment. We are more exposed to the commercial vehicle segment. And there we see that we have enough time. And I think fuel cell and hydrogen cell is being still evaluated for the commercial vehicle because the battery weight by itself on the Tesla Semi was launched in 2017, but commercially it has not come into production. They have recalled it. I mean, they've given a press statement some time back saying that they're not going to do it immediately. It's mainly because the battery by itself is more than 10-ton weight there. And because of that, the load carrying of the truck is less. So the commercial vehicle, what people tell me knowledgeable on this business, anyway, it's all on public domain, that the commercial vehicle will be the last segment which will be affected by the EV.
Thank you, sir. Next question. You have done revenues of rupees 1,000 crores in 9 months. How does this compare with the previous year's 9 months?
Yeah, previous year it was 1,150 crores
For 9 months.
for 9 months.
Thank you. Within your various segments of business, where do you see maximum traction?
So we see traction in all the 3 segments of business. We are coming from a very low base in the auto powertrain. The capacities, the new businesses, what we have got in for the BS6 or the multinational companies setting up in India for the global hub for the IC engine manufacturing. They've just commissioned the plants or in the process of commissioning the plants, the divisions. So that business is not really come into a top line revenue at all. So that is going to grow. In the auto aluminum, as you know, we are very, very, very small. We know who our peers are. Technically, technologically, capably, we are on the top 5 segment already with the industry leaders. But I like to not put names here. But yes, we are on par there on the capability, the infrastructure, the capacity, everything is there. But we are at a very nascent 250 crore business. The top 10 players in the country are more than around 15,000 crores they're doing as sales, approximately, I would say. And today we are at 250 crores. So there is a lot of headroom for us on the auto aluminum. Industrial engineering segment is because the end users are many here. There is no cap on how we can grow this business. It depends on the opportunity, what we get in the GDP growth cycle here. The capex cycle will set up in India. The China One policy will play out here. More manufacturing will come into India. The multinational companies getting into manufacturing will like to limit their core manufacturing and rather rely on suppliers like Craftsman to get into and have their assembly and testing procedures. So we see that as an opportunity because we have been supplying globally from the industrial sector to various customers across the world for capital equipment only. So we know our strengths there, and we are a ready fit for any multinational setting footprint for capital goods, which is suitable for us to manufacture either sub-assemblies, parts, or even the fully finished product.
Thank you. Could you tell us which is a comparable company among listed players?
We don't have a comparable company in auto powertrain because we have according to CRISIL itself, we are the leading player in the commercial vehicle segment and one of the biggest in the farm sector. Because when we say one of the biggest in the farm sector, because what is not come out of the OEMs, they're keeping it is still inside for the machining. So we don't have a peer on the auto powertrain very, very clearly. because we are not in the casting business. If we are a casting, then we can compare us with some of the foundry names which are there for the in the market. So there's no comparison. I think we are complementary to some of the great names in the auto industry who are making forging and machining. We are complementary to them. We are not competing with them, but we are complementary. I would say that. In the auto aluminum, it is clear, yes, there are the top 5 players. Technically, processing-wise, capability-wise, capacity-wise, we're already on the top 5. But still, the numbers have not kept up. So these names are well known to all of you, and these are well documented businesses where most of them are in the listed space. I think where we make a difference is we are very good in machining also compared to the other players. That is our USP.
Thank you. What is the capacity utilization level as of Q3 FY21? Can the last quarter sales and PAT run rate be realized next fiscal year on an annualized basis?
See, I would not like to tell you on any forward-looking number, but when I say that the derived number from the DRHP 9 month to 6 month, you can calculate it's a 485 crore top line, right? And the 485 crore top line is in spite of big commodity increases, which the raw material supply chain was disrupted. We still had many of the supply chains not being suppliers not performing, and the goods, our OEM suffering because of that system. The third point, more important point, was also the model change to BS6. That is still not streamlined in the production. So the waiting list for some of the vehicles is there. So 9 month is a number. It is not that we have hit the peak in 9 month number or the Q3 number. Q3 number is we had a decent capacity utilization, and the headroom to grow is there because we know that the medium and heavy duty commercial vehicle numbers were low in Q3 still compared to what it was in FY19. So when you do that math, I think it is quite clear that the FY19 numbers is not a fluke number.
Thank you. There are a number of questions on valuations, so I'll just club them into one. The question is to the company and the BRLM. Could you tell us a little bit about how you've arrived at the valuation?
Valuation, I will leave it to the BRLM.
Ravi, you want me to
take that?
Oh, sorry, Ashish, you can continue. Yeah,
I can go ahead. Yeah, so the pre-money valuation is 3,000 crore, post-money is 3,150 crore. Valuation, as you know, is a function of not just the numbers the company has delivered, but also the intrinsic value of the company, and what investors expect is the future potential of the company. I think it's basis on the outlook that investors have on the end user segments, how much Craftsman has outperformed the industry historically by, and based on that, a valuation has been derived, and that's the valuation at which most of the institutional investors have come into the deal. Pinak, if you want to add something.
I think the only couple of things that I would like to add is that some of the things that you need to look at qualitatively also is the resilience of the company, how they've maneuvered and maneuvered successfully, both the COVID situation, and you look at the run rate of performance. Also prior to that, you look at the BS6 transition period, which the company went through. So all of those qualitative factors, need to be kept in. While we can't talk about future numbers here, there's a large level of capex which has been built by the company, which I think Mr. Ravi talked about, when the presentation was done. All of that is likely to bear fruit. So look at everything in its context is the way that I would request you to suggest request you to look at without getting into forward numbers right now.
Thank you. Could you talk a little bit about your strategies of expanding the business?
We are spread across various segments of the business. I think most of our businesses are highly scalable, and some of the businesses are scalable, yes. So I don't think we need to, diversify further. We have to look at the right opportunities and just increase our presence there. Soak up the capacities. I think a lot of capacities are there. When we are doing in FY19, 1,800 crore with Q3, Q4 not doing well, and the bulk of the capex which was done in FY19, more than 400 crore not being utilized, then you can understand what is the capacity available in the company. So I think that is our first priority going forward.
Thank you. What are your exports currently, and how do you see the proposed PLI scheme influencing your business?
The current direct exports is 9% of our business. The indirect exports, tier 2 exports, where there's no other value addition done by our customer. We actually finish packing those parts and is going to Europe and North America. There's another 10%. I don't count these. Direct revenues are 9%, indirect revenues are 10%. It's around 19%, I would say. But apart from that, I think the end product of the customers, what they export as tractors or two-wheelers, I'm not counting that at all as exports. So now directly, indirectly, we are dependent on 19% export. That's good. I think that will grow going forward because India is going to become a global manufacturing hub. There is a China plus one policy. And this also with this EV penetration, IC engine technology is getting more and more concentrated in India for the global market, also for other countries like the African countries. The PLI scheme, I think we are not anyway looking at a greenfield facility for investment to take advantage of that. We are already having 11 plants, so we are looking at only some capacity balancing, maintenance capex, things like that going across all the plants. So the PLI scheme will attract more investment for multinational companies, Indian companies, corporates to do it. That means more outsourcing will happen with these investments coming in. It will give us an opportunity indirectly for our existing plants to supply more.
Thank you. The next question. What is the current debt on the company and what is the debt to equity ratio?
While CFO answers the question, I mentioned that March 31st, our debt was 1,040 crore. We were at 880 crores as December 31st, which is already filed. So the debt equity is a shade above 1 now. Pardon? 1.15 as of December. As of December is 1.15. And on our own, without the equity coming in, it is very clear that we'll be slightly above 1 surely. But with the equity coming in of 130 crore for debt reduction, it will the debt equity will be less than 1.
Thank you. At peak capacity utilization, what sort of revenues are possible? If you could answer that.
Yes, the peak capacity utilization we never have been tested so far, even in Q3 level. So I can leave that indication to you. Capacity utilization improved in Q3, but still nowhere near our capacities.
Thank you. You are showing large revenues in machining charges. Could you help explain to us this line item?
Yes, we are not in that line item. We are not buying the castings from the foundry. This means customer is sending the cylinder blocks, cylinder heads, or in some certain cases also the transmission housings. These are parts which are sent to us for processing. We do the critical machining and our invoicing will be only on the process what we do, and that material is coming free of cost, going back as free of cost. So it is not captured in our top line revenue. That is why our top line revenue looks depressed when compared to our gross block.
Thank you. The 400 crore capex that you incurred in FY19, was this a prerequisite by a specific client?
No, it is not any specific client because we have 10 plants all over, and we have in the auto powertrain itself, we have key customers itself more than 10, quite large customers. So in the auto aluminum, we have invested only recently. Yes, we have gone for higher tonnage missions and things like that. So to put us in a top bracket, and we have one business for that. That is in the beginning stage of starting production. So overall, it is not for any single client we have put up any capital. If I recall back, that was way back in 2010 when we were at 300 crore FY10 sales, around 300 crore. We put a capex of 200 crore. That was mostly for Daimler. That was the point when we did. But now the capex is not for any single client. It is for It is across all three segments of the business, and it's across many plants which are catering to different customers.
Thank you. Why is the interest cost as a percentage of debt so high?
Last year, if it looked high, it was high, interest rates were high. Out of the 140 crore or something like that, the number you see approximately, it is 110, 115 will be the actual financial cost, and 25 crore will be the lease. We may have many buildings on lease in our Pune facility and Faridabad facilities. We don't own the land and building. That lease rental is classified as financial cost as depreciation and interest. Some of the generators, what we are taking on lease, also power equipment is there. Having said that, if you look at the number in the 9-month figure, this has come down to
70 crores.
Around 70 crore, and that is also inclusive of the lease rental, 13 crores. So if we look at the financial cost for 9 months is 67 crore, and we are reducing debt. As we speak, the debt is getting reduced. So the point is the progressive debt reduction from April last year to December last year has yielded in around maybe around 55 crore or something like that would have been the financial cost totally for the 9-month period. So yeah, 55 crore has been around 55 crore will be the financial cost. So for 9-month period. So going forward, we will be generating and we'll be able to reduce post IPO. There is some credit rating improvement will happen. On top of it, this 130 crore we are raising in the IPO is also going to reduce debt. So financial cost will quickly come down. That's what is. There's enough evidence there that it will come down.
Thank you. We are coming to the last couple of questions now. Are you seeing any flow of business or inquiries from the China Plus One strategy? If yes, in which business?
It is coming from all segments of the business. We are seeing that very, very clearly. We have North American suppliers, American suppliers saying that we have bulk of the supply coming from China. Some of the supplies coming in from Mexico. They don't have any suppliers in US because of the cost and the nature of the business. Some technologies also, they have lost some manufacturing knowledge because they've been concentrating on other things. They now say that we want Indian supplier very, very clearly. And what it will replace? It will replace bulk of Chinese requirement and part of Mexican requirement. I think that is there in all segments of the business. We look at auto powertrain as a course. This China Plus One plus also the EV invasion in Europe is putting more emphasis on India sourcing for their global products, which all of them are confident that IC engine will continue on the passenger vehicles. Yes, the percentage of EV will grow, but the entire world will not be EV on the passenger vehicle segment. So engines have to be manufactured for the next 10-20 years, surely. So I think they are moving towards India because they don't want to invest anything new in Europe because it's expensive. Now China is ruled out because of various geopolitical reasons. I think that is playing out there. On the industrial engineering segment, it is two factors. One factor is now at least finally India has now looked at there will be the capex cycle will set in is the story which is playing around, and that means they have to be with their Make in India policy from the government. They have to have their feet here. There might be some barriers for import on the price structures. So having that into factor with PLI being another good trigger for them to make the investment, the China One policy will play out on this PLI. Our growth story within India itself will help us to get more business.
Thank you. The last question of the day. What will be the impact on business as the government has announced a 5% rebate on new car purchases to the consumers in lieu of scrapping the old?
I mean, I do not know about the policy. I'm not a policy expert, but what I can talk about commercial vehicle and what I can talk about passenger vehicle, I think the commercial vehicle by itself, the older commercial vehicles are anyway, I'm talking about the heavy duty. I'll just stick to the heavy duty or medium duty, because they have to, the engines are more on, the powertrains are getting, once they cross 1 million kilometers, it's very difficult to get a efficient fuel economy there or efficient speeds. So already they're flying in local areas, and or the lower end of that, very old vehicles are taking garbage or very low weights, maybe voluminous cargo. So I see that then even on the highway, even today, I don't see much of very old vehicles plying. Yes, I feel the government cannot, the government will, I cannot talk about government policy, but I would say that surely an incentive for buying new vehicles will lead to big growth. Yes, it cannot be made compulsory, looks like. It can be made an option with some incentives. If that is the case, yes, all segments should see some growth. Yes.
Thank you very much, sir. That brings us to the end of the Q&A session. Now let me invite Mr. Ashish Nigam from Axis Capital Limited to propose the vote of thanks. Over to you, Ashish.
Thank you, everyone. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for taking the time out. After listening to what the management team had to say today, I'm sure you all have a much better understanding about the nuances of the business and all the opportunities ahead. I've had this session with Ravi innumerable times, and after every meeting, I learn something new, and it makes me even more enthusiastic on the Craftsman story. As emphasized earlier, the issue will open for public subscription on the 15th of March, which is Monday, and it closes on the 17th of March, which is Wednesday. The price band has been fixed at rupees 1488 to 1490 per share. Bids can be made for a minimum of 10 equity shares and in multiples of 10 equity shares thereafter. Thanks again, and we look forward to your assistance to make the Craftsman IPO a grand success. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Ashish. And thank you, everyone, for joining the virtual brokers and analysts meet of the Craftsman Automation Limited IPO. Please feel free to reach out to us for any further queries or mail us at ipo@craftsmanautomation.com or ipo@adfactorspr.com. We will do our best to revert to your queries within 48 hours. Take care and stay safe. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you.